All right, so if you look at furry conventions over the last, 20 years or so, you will quickly notice that there are things that change about these cons all of the time. Like a convention can move from one location to another to have more space for attendees to enjoy. Or another convention could go from 3 days long to 4 to have more time for attendees to enjoy. But now we're starting to see a new change that furry conventions are trying, raising the age requirement of attendees from general audiences to only those who are 18 or even 21 and older, all to have attendees enjoy the con with people closer to their same age group. And like any new change, there's a lot of thoughts going around this idea, but if you were to ask me, I think this change for furry conventions is a change for the better. Let me explain. Let me start by giving some context around this idea. There is a new furry convention that was started just last year called Las Vegas FurCon, or LVFC. They've had 2 iterations so far, one in 2023 and one that just wrapped up in April of this year. And they are notable to this story because they are one of the very few conventions in the United States that have an adult age requirement for attendance. When they first started in 2023, they set that age requirement to 18 years old, meaning you had to be a legal adult to attend the convention. But after their first year, LVFC decided to experiment with raising the age limit to 21, an even higher limit than before, with the initial idea that it would clear some logistical hurdles and improve their negotiating power with their host hotel. So they ran that experiment for this year's convention and saw very positive results. They sold out all of their initial rooms at the main hotel, causing them to find overflow hotels to accommodate the demand. They increased their attendance numbers by over 40%, from just under 1,500 to just over 2,100 people, and also increased their charity donations from around 6,200 to a little over 10,000, a 63% increase. So with all of these positive outcomes combined with the overwhelming support of congoers themselves, LVFC recently announced that from next year on, they are keeping their requirement of limiting attendees to ages 21 and over for all future iterations of the convention. That is basically the origin story behind this topic of discussion about restricting the age of convention attendees. After LVFC made that announcement on Twitter, furries did what they do best on that website and were quick to voice their opinion on it. And after reading through a bunch of comments that were both for and against the change, I began to notice this recurring theme, a theme that I think has actually been brewing for a while in this fandom, but the community is just now starting to talk about it a little bit more in the open. There seems to be this tension between members of the furry fandom and the conventions that are put on for them. Tension that is leading to some members, particularly those who are past their teens and early 20s, feeling less satisfied with the current convention landscape and are looking for something different than what's out there currently. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, but here's how I would quickly summarize it. Over the past few years, especially right after the global pandemic, the furry fandom has seen some significant growth. And not just in member count, the fandom has not only gotten larger, but has gotten younger as well. More people are joining the fandom at younger ages, to the point where today, about 1 in every 5 furries in this fandom are under the age of 20. And that's significant. In fact, what that growth is doing is fundamentally changing the demographics of this fandom, and that is especially true when it comes to furry conventions. At least for furry conventions here in the United States. I can already feel the fingers of the EU furries flying on the keyboard saying, our cons are 18 plus already, it's not like that in the US? And the answer is no. No, they are not. But anyway, with the rise of the overall popularity of this fandom, there has also been a rise in furry convention attendance. And the same thing applies here. The ages of congoers is getting younger on average as well. And these factors that have made cons younger and busier have caused a shift in the overall vibe of conventions, especially for those who have been going for cons for a long time. Now, everyone has their own way of expressing this vibe shift. I've seen everything from the idea that cons have gone from a bunch of weird queer nerds hanging out to these multi-day long college frat-style parties. I've seen feelings of increased pressure to fit in, since everything is a popularity contest when you're younger, and you'll basically be ignored if you're not already well known, and other thoughts of that nature. But I think what that all boils down to is that for furries who have been doing this for a lot longer than I have and are past that late teen, early 20s age group, this rapid injection of younger furs into their previously primarily adult spaces is a change in furry conventions that isn't something they're all comfortable with. Now, I don't want to say that this idea of separating minors from adults at conventions is anything new. Things like convention night markets, where adults are welcome to be more expressive about their sexuality, or even just adult-only panels at events that happen after a certain time in the evening or after dark, have been around at cons for years at this point. However, those examples are tied to the necessity of anything not safe for work in this fandom requiring participants to be legal adults. That's a very hard and fast rule. I think the core of this vibe shift about cons is actually a lot simpler than that. I think there is a growing demand for conventions without minors just for the sake of adults wanting to be around other adults. Going back to that general tension about cons that I was referring to earlier, a lot of furries who are frustrated with this new age of conventions will simplify things by saying that cons are just getting too large. And while I get where they're coming from, I think a better way to phrase that is, for the furry fandom specifically, we're starting to see some of the limits in cons that are one size fits all. These are for cons that are targeted for everyone, which is most cons these days, but especially the big ones that draw more than 5,000 people, sometimes even double that, where anyone from chaperoned kids to those well into their adult years are welcome to attend. These cons will try to cater to all of those audiences all at once, which on its own is great. But what we're seeing happening is that as the attendance of these cons grow, the lines between what is appropriate for what ages is really starting to blur, where minors may be exposed to things that they are not old enough for, and adults have to constantly watch their back to make sure they're in appropriate time and space to do whatever they're legally allowed to do. It might seem subtle at first, but at a place like a furry convention where the whole point is to provide a space for furries to just be themselves, that can really add up to a lot of things to think about and can put a damper on the entire convention experience. And it's not just the attendees that have to worry about that. The convention staffs themselves are responsible for that as well. Which brings us back to Las Vegas FurCon. There are already enough things to worry about when starting a brand new furry convention, and limiting the attendance to just adults at first and then narrowing it down even further to just 21 and over makes things a whole lot easier. And while the upsides for the con staff are obvious, I think this change was met with so much positivity and excitement is that this age floor meets the demand for adult-only conventions, turning a policy change into an attractive differentiating factor for LVFC, especially when compared to the one-size-fits-all cons that we were mentioning earlier. Now, let me be clear. I don't think this adult-only policy is going to become the new standard for all furry conventions, especially those that are already well established. I seriously can't think of any reason for cons who are already running on thin margins as it is to cannibalize themselves by cutting off their core audience. But for newer conventions like LVFC, I think enforcing an age floor like 21 and up is a great selling point. Now adult furries have a convention here in the US where they know that everyone else at that con will be above a certain age, and if they want to responsibly participate in an adult activity, they don't have to worry about ensuring that everyone there is of age to do so. And a side note here, but it also helps that this con in particular is in Las Vegas, which, to be fair, other than layovers at McCarran, I've actually never been to Las Vegas, but I've heard of all the places in the United States where it doesn't make sense to bring minors. A place nicknamed Sin City is probably at the top of that list. But that aside, the point I'm trying to make here is that I wouldn't be surprised if other new conventions start to make similar moves to enforce certain age demographics. And that goes for both ends. There might be a rise of conventions that are strictly safe for work and encourage younger audiences to come. In fact, my local convention, Anther Northwest, they're like that. But who's to say there isn't room for cons for those even older than 21 or even older than 25? I know there are a lot of people making jokes about this on Twitter, but seriously, why wouldn't a convention for those 30 and up be a good idea? You can have panels like the importance of stretching in the morning and tips on paying off debt, and instead of EDM at the dances, you could have an 80s R&B night. Like, imagine how fun it would be to dance in fursuit to Kool and the Gang. Hey, get down on it. Hey, get down on it. You can't tell me that wouldn't be fun. But I hope you see the point I'm making. I think cons going 21 and up won't just be for logistical reasons. It'll also be responding to an inherent want in this fandom for furries wanting to be around people their age. And again, I highly doubt that this will become the norm, and I don't want to make it seem like older furries are completely turning against younger furs. Providing an encouraging environment to find your place in this community is essential to this fandom's continued existence. But for furries who are still in their late teens and early 20s, hanging out with people your age is something you really don't have to think about, since that's already the largest section of the fandom. So no matter what convention you go to, you'll always have people around your age to hang out with, which can't be said for everyone else in this fandom. Look, at the end of the day, I'm all about having more options for more people to enjoy their convention experience, and I think LVFC's decision to go 21 and older really resonates with a lot of people who may be starting to feel less and less inclined to choose from the current convention options. And besides, cons changing to meet the demands of their attendees is nothing new. They've moved locations for more space and have gone longer for more time. Maybe the next big change for cons is requiring attendees to be a certain age to participate. And if that makes furries excited to go to conventions again, then I'm all for it. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace. How you gonna do it if you really don't want to dance? By standing on the wall. Get your back up off the wall. That's fire.